All right, welcome back to Patrick Christie's Tonight. Now, Britain's top private schools in the Middle East are teaching pupils to beat their wives. Yeah, the Telegraph has discovered textbooks used in many of these schools teaching pupils how to deal with rebellious wives. One refers to, quote, beating for the purpose of remediation. The book says its objective is to safeguard marital life against the breakdown and to maintain companionship and social intimacy. A husband is not allowed to hit his wife using a whip or stick or in her face. Well, that's nice, isn't it? That's good. He is to use instead a siwak, which is a small teeth-cleaning twig or a light handkerchief. It goes on to say that beating is a message to the wife informing her that she has overstepped all the boundaries. Now, Britain's top boarding schools have kept all of this quiet. They've expanded abroad to make money from wealthy expats. Only Muslim pupils at the schools take these lessons, although expat children are required to have morality lessons set by the UAE government. It's all very weird, isn't it? Here to discuss this now is Mustafa Warsi, chairman of Pickthall House. Thank you very much for joining us. What do you make of this?
Thank you. Well, first of all, happy Easter, Patrick.
Thank you very much.
It's very nice. It's very nice to be here. And yeah, so I have a bit of experience with the UAE. I in fact grew up there before moving to the UK, which is why I sound like this. And you know, while the UAE is a beautiful and wonderful country in many respects, has done great things for its people, you know, it's hard not to say that what they're doing here is a little more than a little bit deranged. And the fact, you know, to a certain extent, what happens in the UAE, what they teach their own people is, in a certain sense, their problem and their responsibility. It's not up to us to police the whole world. But the fact that British schools and British institutions are starting to co-opt and starting to okay or green light or legitimize this sort of attitude is incredibly concerning, particularly given the light of, you know, social tensions here in the country here. You know, you don't want it to be the case that we start blurring lines in different places. It simply results in an unprincipled approach to the education of our youth, which is ultimately what will comprise our future.
Yeah.
You know? And so, ultimately speaking, I think that it's, you know, I mean, I think it's very important that British institutions remain faithful to British values and obviously, and maintain red lines very strictly. Obviously, the safety and security of our young women, particularly in the light of all the horror show that this country has gone through is absolutely maintained, that this red line is absolutely maintained in every sphere of life. But beyond simply the British angle, I additionally want to say that, you know, a lot of people draw the wrong lessons from history. And that while there are a lot of problematic attitudes, you know, prevalent in Muslim communities all over the world, and again, no one knows this better than me living here in the UK, I think that in a certain sense, what we ought to think about when we study religious teaching, and this applies across the board, is not to recognize that things exist within a certain context, and then to recognize that we are not to do as the greats did, but instead seek what they sought.
Great point. And I was going to ask you this. You've teed it up perfectly, really, because from an outsider's perspective like mine, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, well, you know, if that is even being mentioned in British public schools, I mean, some of the top schools in the country have these bases in the UAE, as you well know. You know, if that stuff is being said there, then goodness gracious me, what on earth is being said, you know, at just normal schools right across the Muslim world? And then is that actually a commonly held view amongst the Muslim world, especially from men towards women?
So that's a very good question. And the thing that it's important to do, or to get right, is to treat it with sufficient respect for the complications of the situation. So, for example, like Turkey, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, I can rattle off 5 more countries, have it absolutely illegal, on Islamic grounds actually, absolutely illegal to touch your wife in a hostile way. So, you know, regardless of what, you know, some morality police or religious, police says, or whatever some Sharia council decides or doesn't decide, you know, if you touch your wife, you will go to jail.
Right.
And this happens in a bunch of Muslim countries. And yet you have in other Muslim countries, you know, this divergence of view. What is ultimately important, particularly from the point of view of Britain, is to recognize that where these illiberal and backwards views, I mean, I would characterize them as frankly deranged views, start to take hold here, we have to be both incredibly vigilant and incredibly cautious to make sure that we are recognizing, you know, that most Muslims, I honestly believe, do not hold these sort of views, but that where they do occur, if you find a Sharia council or a Sharia court or communities in the UK where this does happen, that these are properly and deftly and aggressively investigated.
I don't know if you've seen it, but I mean, Louis Theroux did this documentary on Netflix about the manosphere.
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
actually, and
it was fascinating.
I thought it was fascinating. Don't get me wrong. It was a really interesting watch, and I'm glad I watched it. But I did think, potentially there is another type of manosphere out there. And stuff like this, with some of the attitudes that you see, whether it's in the UAE or whether people have brought those views with them to parts of Britain, either coming from, I don't know, maybe more rural parts of Pakistan, for example, or places like that. Is that not something that we should be doing a bit more to shine a bit of a light on as well? That we do have a very real kind of manosphere, like with the Sharia courts here in Britain?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the Sharia councils, serve a whole host of functions, right? So, in certain cases, they're simply there to provide advice on, how to get married or something, or how, how to hand out inheritance. But in other cases, you will find communities where, women are being mistreated, where women don't know what their rights are. And in those cases, absolutely, the state should intervene if the state doesn't do it, the people will. Everybody is sort of already on the edge, on pins and needles, given the grooming gang scandal, right? Yeah. There's only so much more a population can take. It's an absolute outrage. And so to that extent, I think it's important that these things are looked at objectively, with nuance, and with sufficient aggression if
it's revealed it is. Well, hopefully these schools manage to stop teaching this stuff. I mean, I do slightly feel for them in a sense, because I think, not the schools, I mean the parents, because I think they've had to try and leak this stuff out for fear of the fact they might be expelled from the country if they actually go over the top with it themselves.
There's also, it's the final very minor point I'll make is that there's a lot of, frankly, nonsense that even Muslims... This is what I mean by the wrong lessons of history. Frankly, a lot of nonsense that a lot of Muslims believe about what the proper way to conduct oneself is within the context of their own faith, right? Which results in all kinds of deleterious, harmful, internecine behavior that, honestly, if you showed this to a genuine Islamic scholar, or even somebody from Turkey or Egypt, they'd be horrified. They'd be like, well, what is going on?
What's going on? Well, look, thank you very much. Really enjoyed that, actually. I hope to talk to you again very soon. It's Mustafa Warsi.
Absolutely, sir.
The chairman at Pickthall House.